As always, before I start into this analysis, I want to give credit to these amazing people I have listed below. This person on Sharelib does an amazing job with giving general background information on characters. I use them a bit for the narratology section, and also just generally for the background for Dream Witch. Also, we have Mayo Sailor on Twitter, also known as Pascal, who does amazing translations of pretty much anything you could ever want. So go check them out if you're ever interested in anything IDV and you just want to get that information. Alright, that out of the way, let's talk about the true terror of 2020. Good old Dream Witch. Now for all my sub-self-thems. For everyone who's seen my channel before and has watched my lore videos, you probably would expect me to be talking about the background of the character design. But actually what I'm going to do at this point is talk about the background of the deductions. I'm going to summarize the story. And you're going to be like, wait, Fern, why are you doing that? Are you a moron? You haven't even gotten to deductions yet, stupid. And I'm like, yeah, first of all, I'm perfect in every single way. I'm a little bit of a narcissist. But second of all, I actually have a darn good reason for doing this, and this is because Yidra's deductions are not about her. They're about two different characters named Darren and Volker. They're brothers, and they're very important to the overall IDV story. They're related to Mercenary, Acrobat. I mentioned him in that video, by the way. They're related to Mercenary, Acrobat, Haster, Dream Witch, Joker, Dancer, Fiona. It's a lot of people they're related to. So I need to explain to you the general story of the deductions before we get into anything else, because if I don't, then you're going to be like, wait, who's Volker? Who's Darren? What's going on? And I don't want to leave you guys like that. Boys support boys. I'm not going to leave you guys confused like that. So let's get into the meat and potatoes, which is the background of the deductions. So we have the character I said earlier, Darren. He is the first person narrator of Yidra's deductions. Yidra is not seen anywhere in the deductions. She is not stated anywhere in the deductions. She is not even, her point of view is not given anywhere in the deductions. She's not there. Well, she sort of is, but we'll get to that. But for all intents and purposes, we don't see her. It's Darren, who is the first person narrator. He's a skeptical guy. He also is sort of the provider for his family, and then he has a brother named Volker, who is a researcher that is obsessed with dreams. Now, this fascination actually spurred from their father, who had delved into similar dream-style studies, until he mysteriously disappeared. Following this absence, Volker had inherited his father's research on these dreams and moved away from home after a dispute with his mother and his brother, both of whom were saying, hey, maybe you shouldn't be studying these dreams because Dad did and now he's like kind of gone. So, bro, maybe you shouldn't. But he decided to go and do that anyway, although he still often sends letters to his brother Darren because, you know, family, they still love each other. Anyway, Darren himself is not interested in modern science at all. And as a child, he was sort of suppressed from that type of stuff, and he didn't really have a lot of imagination. He's sort of like a potato bland type guy. And under the weight of his mother's illness, he had to go make a living early on, and he works as a janitor under a professor named Professor Thompson. Now, here's where it gets interesting. A new researcher named Lucino had recently arrived under Professor Thompson, and he had a new work position there. The current professor, who was Thompson, was sort of unenthusiastic about this because he was sort of taking his position, and he wasn't really happy about that. Darren didn't really care about any of their dynamics. Again, he's sort of like a potato boy. He's just there as a janitor, cleaning up, doing the work, you know, providing the bread for his family, as the boys do. Don't cancel me for saying that. I'm sorry, that was a joke. It was a joke. Anyway, the mother's condition continued to deteriorate, and her wish was for Darren to bring her brother back. Her wish was for Darren to bring his brother back, not her brother. She's the mother. Pardon. However, Darren was unaware that his brother had been cursed. Yes, I said that right. And transformed into a serpent. I'm going to get far more into that curse later on and explain, like, what actually happened. But, just for the record, the brother's away. He gets cursed. The other brother doesn't know that, and he wants to invite his brother over to visit their family because, you know, their mother's dying. So, because his brother's residence was far away, and he wasn't wise about what happened to Volker, like the curse and everything, Darren had no choice but to go and find a way to collect a bunch of money to get travel expenses to go and bring him over back. Now, it just so happened that Professor Thompson was willing to pay a hefty price for rare reptiles at the time, and Darren had recently discovered a strange serpent in his home. That unknown to him was his brother, who, upon changing and transforming, wanted to fulfill the promise of the last wish of their mother, which is for him to go visit them. So he went to go visit, even though he was in the process of transforming. He transformed. Now he's at their house as like a weird little snake creature that has legs. It's a weird thing. Anyway, so Darren was like, "Bro, I need money. These people are buying like weird reptiles. There's this weird snake in my house that has legs." Boom, money plan. So he ended up catching Volker and sold him to Thompson and Lucino in exchange for some money that he used for traveling and medical expenses. Later, when he went to go bring his brother back to visit her mother as her dying wish, he found that he was experiencing strange dreams where he was descending down a long staircase, a dream nearly identical to the one his brother wrote about in his diary. With Darren unaware of the truth regarding the disappearance of his brother and his father, the vicious cycle will continue, and it looks like he's next. This full detailed explanation will uncover the mysteries of Darren, his family, and the torment they have continuously suffered under Yidra. Furthermore, it will also reveal more information regarding the design characteristics behind Yidra, such as the implementation of her tail, her goat ears, and other design quirks, which were actually found out from the official Weibo page of the design artist. Yes, I had looked around. It's a long story. I'll get to that point when I get there, but I'm really proud that I was able to find that. That took a long time to find, and I ended up finding it, and I'm happy about that. Furthermore, I will uncover and explain the parallel story between Lucino and Darren. Anyway, out of the way, let me go on to the next point, Dreamland. No, that's not a Disney park. Gosh, I hate this. No, this has nothing to do with anything related to the lore. I just really hate Disney, and I hate like their company, and I hate the parks. I hate the parks so much. Oh my gosh. I was actually forced to go to Disney once. And you're like, "Oh, your parents forced you?" No, that's not it. My parents wouldn't be stupid enough to spend money on something that dumb. What happened is I was a part of a research group. In osteoarthritis, I did programming for an osteoarthritis research group, and they wanted to go like on a trip there, and I was like, "Okay, you guys can go. I don't want to." And they're like, "No, you gotta go." And I'm like, "No, I don't want to." And they're like, "Fine, but you have to go anyway." So I had to go. And you're like, "Oh, they paid for Disney everything. What's the problem?" No, I had to pay. I had to pay to go on a stupid Disney trip. So now to talk about Dreamland, we have to explain why we're going to talk about Dreamland. This is because it actually relates to Volker and their father. Now, their father and Volker, as I mentioned earlier, we're talking about sleep studies, and to explain what that is sort of Dreamland. They're studying Dreamland. The large descending stairs I mentioned earlier are actually in reference to Dreamland, which I will explain to you with an excerpt from information on the wiki on Lovecraft mythology for this place. So, the Dreamlands is a universe where H.P. Lovecraft's Dream Cycle series was taking place. It's an alternate reality that can only be entered via dreams. The Dreamlands are divided into several regions, including such notable areas as the West Entrance, the Forbidden Lands of the East, and the Underworld. These regions cannot be accessed when awake and require that the traveler be sleeping. If the dreamer wishes to enter Dreamlands, he should will into existence a flight of descending stairs. These are known as the 70 steps to lighter slumber. They symbolize the descent of the dreamer into a further, deeper dream state. If he goes down, he arrives to the Dreamland's gateways known as the Cavern of Flame, where two gatekeepers wait to allow for further descent. Alright, so as to what that has to do with Volker, obviously, these stairs are in reference to the stairs that Darren sees later on and to the stairs that Volker sees at the start of the deductions. I haven't read the deductions to you yet, but let me assure you, we do see a whole bunch of stair stuff, and this is the stairs. Also, the father and Darren are clearly both researching this land, and if you didn't know, Dreamland, Dream Witch, this kind of, it's a bit obvious, but Dream Witch sort of lives in Dreamland. This is her domain. She kind of controls it. She has a vast power in this area. It's not like she made it, but she is very powerful there. That's like her home base, I guess you could say. So the deeper you go into Dreamland, the more power Yidra has over you, the more influence she has, the more control she has. So, I know I said that Yidra isn't shown in the deductions or mentioned, but she is there as an influence, sort of. We don't directly see her, and she still plays a role, but we'll get more into that later. But this is just to explain the Dreamlands, like that part itself, and we'll get more into it later. But now I actually want to talk about character inspiration to give more information on Yidra herself. Now, you may not know this, but Yidra is actually based on a woman named Carla Tucker, and you're probably wondering, what? I haven't heard of her. Who's that? And I didn't either. But boy, do I got a little interesting story for you. So in my search, I was able to find a Japanese site that stated Dreamwitch's servants were based on a woman named Carla Feytucker. Now, while Tucker has some similarities to Yidra, specifically in the fact that she was a murderer who killed people using a pickaxe, I was skeptical as that's sort of where the similarities ended, and I couldn't really find a single thing about her being related to Lovecraft or Identity 5, V, whatever you call it. But I wasn't satisfied. Why would a Japanese wiki cite her if she wasn't actually related to anything? Because I found this on a Japanese website, and I'm like, well, Japanese websites on IDV lore, if you don't know, are usually pretty darn good. Like, they're usually really, no offense to our wiki, our NAEU wiki's good, but Japanese wiki, they usually say things that are, like, accurate. Like, you can fact check it. So I was really skeptical that I could just not find anything on it at all. I was looking everywhere, and in English, and I was looking on like these other Japanese sites I saw. I searched and I searched and I searched, and I could not find a single thing to actually connect this. And I was so confused. I was like, Japanese IDV wouldn't do this to me. You wouldn't do this to me. I trust you guys too much. So I wasn't satisfied. And so I was like, you know what? Pedal to the metal. Pull up your bootstraps, Fern. We're gonna go deep diving. So I started searching a whole bunch of different terms. I searched in Russian. I searched in I searched in French actually. I searched, and eventually it was stupid because I found it in Chinese, which I should have been my first thing. But I found it in Chinese on a Weibo account, which if you don't know is a Chinese app. I happen to have the app because, side note, Weibo is basically where all the news leaks come from. So if you ever see an IDV YouTuber or poster where they post leaks and stuff, 99% of it, except for like actual leaks, like from the file leaks, are just from Weibo. They're just reposts from Weibo. And you can like download the app and see it yourself. They have an English version of the app, which is what I use. And you can just be like, oh, here's all the news. Don't even have to wait for that stuff. That's a side note. But I was finally able to find a post of it on Weibo. Now, this was after I saw some little information on her, so I was like, okay, well, sure, there's just a couple of people saying that this is a connection, but why is there a connection? So I refined my search a little bit to mention IDV and Carla Feytucker, and I found something shocking. Apparently, I found Yidra's official character designer's Weibo account. Yeah, the official account of the person who designed the character. I didn't even know they were allowed to post about their characters, but apparently, because I found it, and it's true. And if you don't know, she also has a lot of other stuff on her Weibo about things that I've never seen in NAEU posted before, like, some design pictures for Joseph, alternate design stuff for Joseph I saw, alternate designs for the Yesterday skin, where she chose one. There was a bunch of them, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I could spend forever talking about. But here's the thing. Most of these posts, like, for the reason... Alright, she didn't make this post because she wanted to. She was sort of forced to. And I actually have a whole nother section explaining why, because boy does that get complicated. And it does relate to Dreamwitch a lot. It's very interesting. But that's for the next section, right after this one, so hold up on that one. But first I should probably explain who Carla Feytucker is, and then what the author had to say about it. So to explain, Tucker is an American woman sentenced to death for killing 2 people with a pickaxe during a burglary. She was the first woman in the United States to be executed since this one person in 1984 in North Carolina. So basically she was the second person in America to be given the death sentence as a woman. So, there was a whole bunch of people saying, oh no, you can't do that, she's a woman. And there was a whole bunch of people saying, oh, she's sorry. And then there was a whole bunch of people saying, no, she deserves... It was a big debate at the time. That's all I'm going to say about that. Anyway, as the artists themselves wrote, why did the servant... This is a quote, by the way. Why did the servant carry a pickaxe? The Dream Witch was based on Carla Feytucker, a famous female pickaxe killer. Therefore, we chose the pickaxe as the weapon of the Dream Witch servant. They replied further under this post with more information as a comment. Carla Feytucker is a well-known female killer who used a pickaxe to kill a couple during a robbery. After being in prison, she suddenly began to read the Bible and behaved very religiously. While in prison, she claimed to have been converted into a Christian, although the main motivation was theorized by many as a way to gain public favor and to reduce her death sentence. I found the fanatics and cross-type weapons very interesting and decided to use her as a main inspiration. Quoth the artist. Not the author, the artist. That's what... Well, I mean, the designer of the character. They did a bunch of stuff. Anyway, so that's who Carla Feytucker is, and basically the designer of the character confirmed, yeah, we based it off of her because A, pickaxe killer, B, she was not really a religious fanatic, not really, but because there was that religious connection there that came after the fact. It's a bit loose, and I wouldn't have I wouldn't have read into that myself if it weren't for the fact that the designer literally said that was the case. But if it weren't for that, I probably wouldn't have picked up on that. But that's the main thing right there. And now we get to go over to the next section where I talked about why she had to make this post in the first place, and that is design theft allegations. Woohoo! Now, this gets really, really drama-like and really crazy, but how should I start? Okay, so here's how I'm going to drop it on you. Do you guys remember a couple months back when there was that allegation that the Perfumer Logic Path wedding skin was stolen from a different design? I don't remember what the official design they said they stole it from was, but there was this huge thing where everyone was like, oh, you stole the design. And then eventually, IDV had to make a post about it on their official account explaining that they didn't steal it. Did they actually steal it? I don't know. I didn't see the original design, but there was a huge thing about it. It's huge. Now, what people don't know is that this was not the first time this had happened. If you ask anyone about this, I guarantee you 99% of people will be like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. There was another allegation. They will have no idea. And that's because the other allegation, which came before this one, wasn't posted on the official Weibo account. It wasn't posted by the official account anywhere, except, and this is not the official account, except for on the account of that designer I had mentioned. So, this allegation was not shown anywhere. So, at this point, we have two allegations. One on the design for Dream Witch, that was the first one, and one on the, bridal skin for Perfumer. But here's where it gets really, really gossipy, because both of these design theft allegations accused the same designer. So, we have one designer who has really eerily similar designs to two other things. It's a bit sketchy, but it gets even better. It gets even juicier, honey. Because what happened is that for the first account of her stealing, the first situation, she made the post on her own account. And it wasn't really spread anywhere because she has a fairly small account, especially compared to official IDV, so no one knew about it. So no one knew she even made a defense. So everyone was like, oh, look, this person did this, and they didn't even make a defense for themselves. How bad are they? And then she was like, well, I did make a defense, but no one saw it. So the next allegation comes around. She's like, IDV, can you please post this on your official account because no one's gonna, see it on mine? So IDV's like, fine, we will. And they did, and they posted it on their account, and that was the Perfumer skin. So now you understand what happened there. But, did she actually steal? I don't know. Again, on either account, I don't really know. But I will tell you what happened with the Dream Witch one, because that kind of relates to here. So basically, the allegation is that she stole the design from a character named Marta in Outlast 2. I don't play Outlast 2. I don't know who that is. I saw pictures and videos and research for this, but I don't really know much about the actual character herself. They do, however, look very similar. And as you can see from these pictures here, is it a bit sketch? Maybe. I don't know, it's a bit weird. But anyway, In the design's poster, the artist actually claims that they had a whole bunch of differences, although the similarities were coincidental. One of them was the shawl. Now, the official IDV disciple we have right now doesn't have a shawl, but in the beta design, she did. And as for the shawl, she said that there were several versions of hairstyles for the servants, including shawls with a headcloth and lengthy, dirtied hairstyles. I finally decided to use dirty hair to make the character more suitable for the setting of a thriller story. And to a certain extent, it's closer to the hair and inspiration of Carla Tucker. About the rickety posture, she had this to say: "We had also tried to pose her with the weapon above her head, but the rickety posture is more in line with the setting of a soulless subject." And for the positioning of Yidra, they said, quote, "Yidra in Lovecraft mythology is something of a mother of the earth. So the model adopts the snake tail that symbolizes fertility, and the goat ears that represent the combination and division of multiple creatures, and also a reference to the god Shub. The prototype of the servant came from Carla Feytucker using a pickaxe with a slender body and long curly hair." And as for the allegation, she has this final statement. "Regarding the definition of plagiarism, from my point of view, the original design includes shapes, colors, builds, all different and without copying intent." Pardon? We had also based her on mythology and reality and used the game style to guide the design process. Any similarity is purely coincidental. And then she leaves us with her design board. Again, don't cancel her, or unless you have actual good reason. But anyway, that's the whole allegation, and boy, whew, you got one artist accused of stealing twice, and then you got a whole bunch of wow. Anyway, on to the next section. So now, after we went over all of that, I'm going to move over to the appearance section. And we're also going to be using in this appearance section some of the things we learned from the post from the official designer. And I'm sorry if it's a bit echoey. I'm working in the garage right now because I'm traveling for Christmas. It's a long story, but basically I don't have my normal setup. So enjoy the echoing ASMR video. Woo. I hate myself. Not really. Alright, so anyway, for the first part of the appearance, we're talking about the goat ears. So Yidra's ears mimic that of a goat, and there's actually a pretty substantial reason for this. Yidra's design is meant to somewhat be a parody or a foil to another outer god named Shub. Anyway, Shub is a female fertility deity said to appear as an enormous cloudy mass which extrudes black tentacles, slime-dripping mouths, and short, writhing goat legs. Cool. Similar to Yidra, this creature also has followers called Goffin. This title is the name given to the favored, once human followers of Shub. When the deity deems a worshipper to be the most worthy, a special ceremony is held in which the black goats of the woods, that being another title for the god Shub, swallows and regurgitates the cultist as a transformed, satyr-like being. A changed worshipper is also endowed with immortal life. Cool again. But this whole connection isn't just something made up on thin air by myself. The literal wiki, the Lovecraft wiki, actually states, in the first sentence, that Shub is very similar to Yidra under the Yidra section. They're both heavily related to the Earth's offspring, with Yidra being related through evolution and Shub being related through fertility. So both grant their followers eternal life as well, another connection, and they both kind of use their followers as tools. Basically, they're not the nicest people in the world, I guess you could say, but that is a lot of similarities right from the get-go. And besides that, we can also see that Shub is further related to another prominent character in the game. That's right, Haster. Apparently a lot of these Lovecraftian gods tend to get to doing it a lot in their free time because it seems that there's a lot of mating going on. Specifically with Haster, he's actually mated with Shub, and they've actually had a child named Ithaca. But what's important here is that Haster has mated with Shub, and they're pretty loyal to each other. So that's a fairly strong connection to the lore. And of course, as I previously said, This was stated in the character designer's post that Shub was the inspiration for the ears, but hopefully all this information here can give you a little bit more background as to why that choice was made. Now we can go over to the next section, which is the snake tail. The snake tail of Yidra is a symbol of fertility. Yidra is related to fertility not just through her connection to reproduction and evolution and her own powers, but also in her foil Shub, who is a fertility goddess, as I previously had mentioned. Historically, serpents and snakes would represent fertility or a creative life force. This is because snakes happen to shed their skin, which was seen as rebirth or transformation. Now, there's also a few other things that snake tails can mean, such as sexual desire, which actually does have some ties to Yidra when we go over one of her other personas in a whole nother section, and I'll explain far more on that when we get there. But now we can go over to the next part here, which is the symbol, the little dream witch symbol that you see everywhere. What exactly is that? Yidra and her followers both bear a strange symbol akin to a star on their body. Now, this symbol is actually depicted on the Necronomicon, and it's made up of 3 smaller symbols. The first one is on the far inside, and it sort of looks like a pentagram, but actually it's called the Ara, A-A-R-A, and is meant to resemble a sign of our race beyond the stars. The second symbol, which looks sort of like a broken paperclip, is called Agga, A-G-G-A, which is meant to recover potency when used with the correct words and shapes. Essentially, it can be used to call ancient powers. The third symbol sort of looks like an upside-down check mark, and it's called Bandar, B-A-N-D-A-R. Now, it's used as the watcher and the observer. If others call this sign, they'll be able to have the ancient beings listen to them and protect them. If you call it, they'll protect you and listen to you. So that's basically the summary of the actual symbol, and of course, as I said before, it is on the Necronomicon. As for what it has to do with Yidra, there's not really a strong connection besides, of course, Lovecraft mythology, but besides that, it's just an interesting symbol that is nice to know a little bit more about. For the purpose of clarification of later events, as was previously done with the deduction summary, I'm going to go over the character letters before the deductions. And yes, I did say letters plural. This is because the character of Volker appears in 2 letters outside of Yidra's. One which he writes an unsent letter to his brother Darren, this is in Haster's Character Day letter. The other where an investigator shares Volker's reports of Lakeside in a Priestess Character Day event letter. Volker was investigating the unusual activities of the residents who live in Lakeside Village on behalf of someone named Arthur Russell. While investigating, he believed the locals of Lakeside were participating in worrisome religious activities, where they would worship a strange creature in the lake. They participated in sacrifices of animals to a water god, who wore yellow robes. Now, if you don't know, yellow robes are a pretty strong reference to Haster, and that's because he's sort of associated with the color yellow. It's kind of one of his names. He's called the Yellow God in Lovecraft mythology. Anyway, after attempting to investigate the sanctuary during a night of special sacrifice, Volker was never heard from, ever again. Dun dun dun! And now I'm gonna go over the letters. I'm gonna start with Haster's, and we're gonna see how this goes. I warn you, they're pretty long, especially Fiona's letter, like whooza. That's a long one. Anywho, quote, Dear Darren, I've arrived at a village named Lakeside with my father's memento. The family I'm staying with is the only one which came from elsewhere, according to Eugene. Now, epic spark notes by Fern. Eugene Hayward is the female dancer's uncle, and he's believed to have disposed of the murdered body of Geisha in the lake of Lakeside Village. Yay. Now, this also upset Haster, and that gets more into Haster's lore and Geisha's lore, and we'll get all to that later. But he's married to his wife, Marjorie, Marjorie. I didn't even know that was a name. Apparently it is. But that's the spark notes on this guy. He's Dancer's uncle. Anyway, they fled this small village with their niece 15 years ago and worked hard to stay. After all I said, this is an exclusive village. They had an extra bedroom since their niece got married, which is the only reason I could stay with them. No one else would have me anyway. Whenever I went for a walk along the river, old-fashioned villagers would stare at me with caution. But luckily, all the villagers were willing to tell me about the legend of the water god. After some digging into the water god's miracles, I discovered several curiosities. According to traditions, in order to praise the water god, bloody animal meat must be thrown into the lake by disciples dressed in yellow. Once an enormous shadow comes to the surface, the villagers should shout out their wishes one after the other. If the water god accepts these wishes, it would return to the bottom of the lake and the villagers' wishes would soon come true. Now, this may sound incredible, but I suspect it's all some sort of religious scam. It's possible that there are piranhas living at the bottom of the lake, and that the enormous shadow is just the piranhas coming up to the surface to eat the meat. At the same time, the meat offering is always prepared by the disciples, and the villagers would contribute. With such interests in mind, the actions of the disciples are suspicious. As for the wishes coming true, I would say it's more man-made than certain. After all, trivial problems such as water dripping from the roof can easily be solved by the disciples. Despite that, the water god may not exist. I'll stay and observe the worshipping activities in 3 days. The answer will surface, and I mean literally surface from the water. Also, as mentioned in my previous letter, I'm getting closer to the fiery cave. For notes again, for Spark Notes, this is the fiery cave that was mentioned at the bottom of the staircase to Dreamland. Check the Dreamland section for that. Fern Spark Notes are over. I'm getting closer to the truth each night. Perhaps I'll get to the answer for which father longed for in the end. Please, send my regards to Mother. I'll be home soon. Love, Volker. Alright, so here we can see Volker has written a letter to his brother that hasn't been sent, which is the important thing. Most likely because it was around this time that he was cursed and, snakes usually aren't able to send letters. It's weird like that. Anyway, it also shows us a lot more of the connections and importance of Volker. He works under a man named Arthur Russell, who often looks into different investigations. If you paid attention in my previous video about Acrobat, you'll recall me talking about him. Following the circus accident, Mike had hired Russell as an investigator and potentially a hitman. I didn't really cover that, but with the new diary up with Mercenary and Wilding, that whole thing, it makes a bit more sense. So I'm lower likely to believe that he may have been as a hitman, but I didn't think so much before. But anyway, he was hired to look for people that were not identified in the pile of corpses, including Natalie, Joker, Wilding, and Sergi. Arthur hired Volker to look into the lakeside area, which is where Natalie's hometown was, to try and find her. He confirmed that Natalie was alive and that Sergi had died. Joker was confused for a dead body because of his burns on his face, although they were partially aware that it may not have actually been Joker, due to questions about his body shape not being the same as Joker's. Anyway, Arthur had apparently hired Nab to track down and locate Wilding on behalf of Mike, as he was probably one of the people not found in the circus. Also, it is suggested that he was sent to kill Wilding, and this is from Mercenary's deductions as well, or his letter, I should say. We don't know for certain if he was sent to kill Wilding, or if Mike said that, or if he was even sent by Mike in the first place. This could be a completely separate operation, but regardless, Arthur did send Nab to track down Wilding. That is 100% certain. Anyway, that's the connection for that, and now I'm going to go over to the Fiona character letter. Dear Miss Gilman, our surveyor Volker submitted the first investigation report a month ago. Volker is on the view that there are unusual religious activities in Lakeside Village, which may adversely affect the upcoming investigation. In fact, we all agree that such religious activities may put the surveyor in danger. As Volker has already applied for leave, we will confirm whether he will continue with the investigation after his leave ends, or will we send another surveyor to Lakeside Village. The following is the original report from Volker. Investigation Report 1, September 12th. After numerous rejections, I have a room with immigrants Eugene Hayward and his wife, whose name I won't be able to pronounce. The terrain of Lakeside Village is odd. The villagers' main living area is enveloped by forest at the foot of a mine. A part of it is also a plot close to a lagoon with mountains on 3 sides, and the only way to get to it is through a narrow mountainway path. Investigation Report 2, September 13th. I've tried to go to the lagoon plot again. There were villagers guarding at the entrance, and I only got permission to go in after some negotiations. There is an entrance to a cave in the northern part of the lagoon plot, where several suspicious personnel dressed in yellow robes were on the ground. I didn't attempt to get close. Investigation Report 3, September 15th. A large boat appeared on the shore of the lagoon, and guards in yellow robes were on guard. I think they may have belonged to a certain religious group, and they have certain privileges in Lakeside Village. The villagers wouldn't answer my questions about them. Eugene and his wife called the guards disciples. Investigation Report 4, September 17th. I tried talking to a disciple who turned out to be surprisingly friendly. The religion doesn't have a name, or he wouldn't tell it to me. Anyway, according to the guard's description, they strive to disseminate the will of God and participate the loving practices of God. However, this god of theirs lives in the bottom of the lagoon in Lakeside Village, and people must offer a sacrifice in order to get his love. He didn't tell me anything about the method of the sacrifice or the offerings. Investigation Report number 5, September 19th. After 2 days of hinting, the wife told me something about the sacrifice. She once hid on the mountaintop and secretly observed the sacrifice activities from afar. The disciples threw offerings from the boat, and a giant shadow soon arose to the surface of the lagoon. The villagers yelled out their wishes from the shore, so that their loud voices could reach the mountaintop. Regrettably, it was too far for her to see what offerings there were. According to the wife, the villagers' wishes all came true, but the wishes she described were just daily needs. From my investigation experiment, I think it's just a scam that the wishes actually come true. Investigation Report number 6, September 21st. I visited each and every villager in the past 3 days and told them about my desire to know more about the legend of the lagoon god. They were extremely manic about the topic, so I got sufficient information. The disciples were in charge of the offerings used in the sacrifice activities, which were livestock. After throwing in the livestock into the lagoon god would rise to the surface, and the villagers would tell the lagoon god their wishes. This part of the description is consistent with what the wife has told me, but the part which the wife didn't understand was where the disciples opened the sanctuary to the north of the lagoon after the wishes were made, and took the remains of the offerings inside for the last part of the ceremony, but no villager knew what the last part of the ceremony was. I think it may be risky to ask the guards about that, but the next sacrifice will be held in 5 days, and I'll find a way to get inside the sanctuary to investigate. We have yet to receive Volkar's 7th investigation report. We plan to get in touch with his family so that he will be able to submit the report as soon as he gets home. All the best, yours faithfully, Arthur Russell. So here it becomes evident that Priestess has hired Arthur to look into the religious activities going on at Lakeside, and in turn, Arthur has hired Volker to actually carry out the mission and find out what's happening. It's also important to note that he's probably there researching Dancer's family as well, as we know that was one of the things Arthur has to look into, so, might as well get 2 done for the price of 1, 2 birds, 1 stone. Anyway, there's also talk about a new ritual going on, which Volker is going to go try and sneak in and see because he's interested, and also for the report, although this actually ends up being a really bad move and potentially playing a role in his curse. And finally, we get to move on to Yidra's letter. Now, this is another one from Arthur Russell to Fiona. Dear Miss Gilman, as we still haven't made contact with Volker, we've sent a new investigator, Chris, to the Lakeside Village to continue the investigation. For Spark Notes real fast, Chris is not knowably, he's not really an important character. We don't know anything about him besides these deductions, so maybe that'll change in the future. But for now, he's just Chris. He's just here, in this little part. Anyway, the following is Chris's original report. December 3rd. I arrived at the Lakeside Village but didn't see any locals. I found Volker's luggage and subsequent investigation reports in the house where he stayed. I notified the local police and found out that there was a fire in the plantation near the Lakeside Village on September 26th. The Lakeside Village locals bravely put out the fire, but no one had seen them since. December 4th. I went to the plantation for further investigation and found a place where a sacrificial event seemed to have taken place. I found some giant scales in the ashes of a bonfire. It seemed like there was a sacrifice of live animals. At the same time, there were abnormalities in the river inside the plantation. A large number of plants have wilted in that area, but the source of pollution remains unknown. December 5th. I went to the lakeshore to investigate. I threw raw meat and livestock into the lake, but didn't see any giant shadow, as mentioned in Volker's report. I went to the cave mentioned in Volker's report, and everything seemed normal. It's just an abandoned mine. As there are no longer any residential activities in the Lakeside Village, Chris is of the view that further investigation is not warranted. All the best, yours truly, Arthur Russell. So basically here, Volker has disappeared and subsequently replaced by a guy named Chris. He's not really important, but he's important to me. Typical Chris. Chris is a cool guy. I like Chris. Anyway, Chris found what appeared to be a site for a ritual where scales laid scattered on the floor. This is most likely the downfall of Volker. It's possible he tried to join in the activities and potentially sacrificed a serpent,
instead of the commonly used cattle, resulting in the snake god Yig cursing him, and the Yig section will explain a lot more about all of that. I also would ask before I move on that you pay extra attention to the fact that there was a large fire at the ritual as well, because this may potentially relate to something else later on. My oh my, it's deduction time, woohoo! Finally, you're probably saying, finally Fern, you took so long, stupid. Don't worry, we got it. Deduction 1, the Dreamlands. In the deepest slumber lies concealed forbidden territory that should never be opened. Tattered letter 1. I saw stairs, descending, the end of which was concealed in a red mist. Where is it that hides the ultimate secret, the one Father was searching for? It appears Volker has a tendency to send unwanted letters to his brother Darren about some mystical dreamland, most certainly referring to the dreamland their father had researched. In the letters he describes in detail stairs descending into mist. Now, the most convenient way to reach dreamland is through dreaming, then descending down the 70 steps of light slumber. Section 2, madness. The first step on the road to madness is believing yourself clever. Like myself, I'm a narcissist. Tattered letter number 2. Dear Darren, last night was a night for breakthroughs. I walked down the stairs, though it seems I'll have no way to enter the Cavern of Flame, but I'm sure I'll find a way. At this point, Volker is still conscious and logical. He recorded his personal accounts from his dream research and sent them in letters to his younger brother, hoping to use his progress to gain the understanding of his father's disappearance. Darren, of course, had none of this, and viewed it as less helpful and more stupid and dangerous. In terms of what was discussed later, while Darren doubts science, he's far more level-headed and logical than his brother. Essentially, he's highly skeptical of most things, and it takes a lot to convince him. Thusly, after he inevitably read his father's research, he was most likely highly uncomfortable and skeptical of its contents. As for Volker's purpose of conducting this research, it's likely in part to retrieve their father, and it may also be done in hopes that this research will garner him some money that can help him with his mother's illness. In any case, he began to sink further and deeper into dreamland again and again, driving his unhealthy obsession with learning more. Furthermore, to give more of a background for what Volker sees, according to Lovecraft mythology, we know that the bottom of the Cavern of Flame is where one meets the two gatekeepers of Dreamland. Only after earning their consent may the traveler go further down the stairs to open the actual door to Dreamland. Another point to note is that according to the previously read letters, there was a fire that went on during the time of the ritual. Now, considering that there is a Cavern of Flame at the bottom of Dreamland steps, it's possible that this fire could potentially be related to the fire here, although this is simply just a point of speculation and there's no hard evidence to back it. Deduction 3, family misfortune. The one thing you have no choice in is your family. When it's family. It's an inside joke, that song. I'm sorry. You have no idea why I did that. I'm sorry. It's a good joke though. Anyway. Diary 1. I've already grown weary of replying to Volker's barmy letters. He's completely sunken into Father's strange sleep studies. When is he going to get a little more realistic? To heck with those stairs and caves. He should focus more on his mother's medical fees. So, essentially, Volker immerses himself further and further into this research. He may have entered the Enchanted Forest around this time, depicted in Dreamland Lovecraft's mythology around this area. Now, his logic and mind have probably been affected by all of this, as evident by the letters which have become more and more crazed and impossible to read according to Darren. Darren has become more frustrated with his brother's ramblings and feels like he's been abandoned to take care of his ailed mother all on his own. Darren never knew that Volker may have actually tried to earn money to help with his research and to support his mother, and he never knew that his brother's research was damaging him. Darren and Volker may have had an argument around this time with the letters, or, considering Volker's condition, at least a one-sided one with Darren explaining how he's feeling. It's evident that Darren is stressed and hurt. Not only does he have to worry about their father being missing, but now their brother is acting like an idiot and he's kind of concerning him. Also, their mother's seriously ill, and he's not that skilled with labor, and he's fairly young, so he has to find a way to make money now, and he has to find a way to take care of his mother's medical expenses, pretty much on his own, because his good old brother Volker isn't being much of a help. And guess what? No one else is willing to help him. He's scared, and he's alone, and he's understandably a little bit angry. Now, Volker has probably assured him that there are countless treasures in his quote-unquote dreamland. As I mentioned before, you can materialize your dreams, including money and stuff, in dreamland. But Darren obviously sees this as nothing more than pure delusions, and now he's even more concerned about his brother's well-being because, come on, this sounds crazy. Although, at this time, it's also important to mention that Volker may have taken up work under Arthur for the sole purpose of making money for their mother. But due to the sort of undercover, sketchy nature of Arthur's business, it's fair to say that he's not able to tell his family about it unless he's specifically allowed to. Although it's never directly stated, I would imagine it's not something they commonly discuss. But regardless, his job isn't finished yet, so he hasn't been able to send back any money. Deduction 4, new and old. Nothing is eternal, especially knowledge. Diary 2. The new professor looks very young and with a good temper, but cleaning up his laboratory isn't going to be easy for sure. My goodness, those scaled-covered beasties give me goosebumps. Also, Professor Thompson looks very unhappy. I mean, I believe this is something to do with the laboratory relocation from before. Alright, I believe you can guess who the new character mentioned is, but if you can't, it's our baby Lucino. Little lizard Lucino, my baby Lucino. I love Lucino. He's a cool guy. I like Lucino. Anyway, Lucino works with Professor Thompson studying reptiles, but by the looks of things, it's not really a happy arrangement. It appears that the lab has been moved to the small town where Dennis lives, and Thompson feels like this is a downgrade from his previous position. Thompson is discussed a lot more than Luchino's deductions, but to give a general background of the two, Lucino is an evolutionist, meaning that he believes humans evolved from natural selection, while Thompson is a creationist, meaning that he believes humans were created through a sort of divine power. They both work together fairly well, although while they work fairly well together, they don't really like each other, sometimes making it a little bit awkward between the two. Yet Lucino does respect Thompson's work and is happy to study under him and be granted such a position. Though the feeling is sadly not exactly mutual, it gets a bit complicated with their relationship. Because it relates to Yidra's power, I should probably explain a little bit more about evolution because she is literally like the god of evolution. Like, that's her thing. That's her thing. Anyway, Yidra's ability centers around absorbing other life forms and taking their evolutionary advantages. In the process, she also takes their memories. Evolution is change in the heritable characteristics of biological populations over generations. So, like, say, for instance, food is sparse for, like, little horse-like animals, and most of that species will die off, but those with longer necks and able to reach food higher up on trees will get to survive, meaning that that trait of having longer necks will pass down on their generation. So that's basically an example of a giraffe, why they have long necks. But you get the general gist of it. Yidra can choose these specific advantages from different animals and combine them with her own form, essentially making her something perfect and akin to genetic perfection. Although, I say that, and then if you look at her actual design, she just has goat ears and a snake tail, which is like, is that really the best you could do? I mean, I would have went for like a cephalopod, like, if we're doing that. They're cool. Okay, cephalopods are darn cool. I mean, like, they can change their color. Come on, that's awesome. They're darn awesome. That's all I gotta say about that. As for our boy Darren, my boy, my main man Darren, he's pretty desperate for money given the situation, so he takes up work under Thompson and Luchino as a janitor, and that's how he kind of knows the dynamic of what's going on between them, though he doesn't really care that much, but he's a silent observer of what's happening, I guess you could say. He also apparently doesn't like reptiles, which is, bad news for Volker later on, but okay. Now time for deduction 5, Plague of Snakes. That would be a good band name. Anyway, even a grain of sand can chafe the foot. Diary 3. Volker hasn't written to me for a long time, and this makes me rather nervous. Today a snake appeared in the house and I used the broom to chase it away. How sickening. Alright, so the sand chafing the foot actually refers to a famous saying. It isn't the mountains ahead to climb that wears you out, but the pebble in your shoe. In short, it means that one small little tiny thing can ruin everything. So something happened causing Volker to turn into a serpent-like creature. That something being the influence of Yidra, or more accurately, to Lovecraftian lore, her husband Yig. Yeah, that's right, Yidra is married, sort of married. Well, she has a mate, and the mate is Yig. Though in IDV, I actually think that Yidra is a combination of both Lovecraftian Yig and Yidra, because she has an appearance sort of similar to Yig, which is a serpent-like appearance, and she seems to have abilities that would more fall in line with Yig. So basically, when he got cursed, it was either cursed by Yig or Yidra, because it is the Yig curse. Like, it is the curse made by Yig. But if he actually was cursed by Yig, that means that there's another character doing stuff in here that we have not even been introduced to. So my personal theory is that just IDV's like, okay, what if we just combine the powers and appearance of Yig and Yidra into one person? Yeet. And then they did that. But I could be wrong. You know, we don't know 100%. Anyway, this begs the question, why? Why curse Volker with the Yig curse? Why would you do it? And the answer is actually just for the sheer enjoyment of it. In Lovecraft, Yig would be the only person able to make this curse, but Yidra is the one doing it in this story, I'm pretty certain, so that's why I think they're combined. But it doesn't really seem that she, or anyone else, has any particular interest in Volker outside of just, oh, they're humans, whatever. So it doesn't really make sense why she would curse him. Historically, or it's fictional, so it's not historical, but in Lovecraftian lore, Yig would only curse someone with this curse, which would turn them into a certain, like, human hybrid. Basically, it turns him into a snake with little tiny snake legs. That's weird, but it's what happens. But he would only do it if someone hurt a serpent. Like, Yig is a pretty chill dude. He likes people. He's like, dude, do whatever you want. I'm a vibe over here. It's fine. I don't mind. But if you touch one of my babies, if you touch a little serpent, I finna kill you. So just don't do that and we'll be fine. And of course, in the lore stories, people do that. And he's like, bro. And it's not a good time. But the thing is, Volker didn't kill a serpent or anything that we know of. Now, this brings me back to the thing I mentioned earlier in the letters. We brought up that little thing about the scales by the ritual area. It is possible that Volker sacrificed a serpent, or he got involved in a sacrificial serpent offering or something like that. And because he was so far down in the dreams of slumber when he travels down there, that would mean that Yidra has a lot of influence over him, because the closer you go down in the dreamland, the more power and influence she has. So Yidra would know what's going on with him. Like, they're really connected because of that. She would know what's happening, and if he's going around killing snakes, and if she is supposed to be combined with Yig in their moral regards like that, then she would be pretty triggered, and she might curse him. That's just one idea. It could also be any of those other ideas I had previously mentioned as to why he would have gotten cursed. We're not 100% on that. But again, as I said with my theory, Volker's been trying to enter Dreamland, and the closer he gets, he's going down there, it would make sense that Dream Witch would be stronger, more powerful, and be able to affect him more. This might actually relate to the reason why his letters start to sound a bit more balmy and crazy over time. The further he gets down in the dream world, the more control Dream Witch has over him, the more influence, and therefore the more insane he's starting to sound. Now, as for Darren, he feels nervous that his brother is not spamming him with letters anymore after this transformation took place that he doesn't know happened yet. This shows that while Darren can get a bit mad and frustrated with his brother, he still deeply cares for him. His mother is ill and aging, his father is gone, and Volker is sort of all he has left right now. What Darren doesn't know is that his brother did come to visit him, but Volker has been cursed into a four-legged serpent, so even after being cursed, Volker still went out of his way to go visit his family, even though they probably would never recognize him. It's honestly sad if you think about it. Deduction 6, ignorance. Professor Lucino believes that humans evolved from monkeys. How ridiculous. Diary 4. I saw that snake again. It climbed into the window in Mother's bedroom. It had grown 4 legs. Gosh, it must be devil-possessed. So the first sentence here could either have been stated by Thompson or Darren. We're not exactly sure. But the deductions show that Darren is more of a laborer who's only interested in work and money, so he doesn't really care about what's happening with the reptiles and stuff. So it would make more sense that Thomas would be ridiculing Lucino in private about his personal beliefs and ideas, just because they kind of have a little bit of a rivalry going on. But anyway, on the other hand, Volker, even after his curse and being shooed away multiple times, still hasn't given up on the idea of returning to his home to visit his mother. However, as his mother's getting sicker and sicker, Darren is always going to be watching her, and Volker can't really find a chance to visit her without being driven off by Darren, who has an irrational fear of snakes. I mean, honestly, it's not irrational. I don't like snakes. I hate bugs more than snakes. Give me a cockroach or a snake, I'd take the snake 10 times over a cockroach. Gosh, I hate bugs. Like, okay, let me explain this. The thing is that spiders and roaches and like little things like that, they're small. They're small so you can't see them, and that's the scariest part for me. It's like being in the ocean and knowing that there's thousands of animals below you that could kill you. You could walk through a building and there could be dangerous, deadly spiders everywhere and you wouldn't know because they're small and they're stealthy. You could be putting on your shoes and there could just be a deadly spider in there and you wouldn't know. You don't check your shoes every time. You don't know. For snakes, they're big boys. You see a big boy, you see the snake, and you avoid the snake. You walk away from the snake. You can't do that with spiders and bugs and roaches. Roaches aren't poisonous, but they're, you don't notice they're there until they're on you, and bugs. All right, so where was I? Anyway, Volker goes to visit his family, but he's sadly been cursed, so no one recognizes him, and because he has the little Yid curse on him, he has little snake feet. He has 4 little snake feet and a weird little snake body. Good, fun time to be Volker. If you don't know what the Yig thing looks like, by the way, I have some pictures around here I'll show you, and there is a whole section on the Yid curse, so we'll get to that. Deduction 7, family. Doesn't matter. Family. I'm sorry, it's the song. No matter what he's done, Darren, you need to bring him home. Still no news from Volker. I sent a letter, but it's like a stone lost to the deep ocean. Mother wants us to see him one more time, but it's like he's so far away from us. Although Volker was at their side the whole time, his family was not able to recognize him. Darren is struggling to come to terms with the fact that no matter how much he works and how much he earns, he's not going to be able to save his mother. She's nearing closer to death, and in an act of desperation, asks Darren to put aside any negative feelings he may have for his brother and to travel to Volker and to physically bring him back home. This, of course, isn't cheap, putting even more of a strain on Volker to try and find a solution to do this. This creates a sense of irony, as Darren is desperate to contact his brother, receiving no word or reply from him and feeling as though he's almost a world away. Meanwhile, all this time, Volker's actually right by his side and desperate not to leave so that his brother isn't alone and lost. Deduction 8, collection. Rarity has nothing to do with beauty or value. Rare? It's just rare. Notice expensive rewards for rare and exotic scaled animals from Professor Thompson. Darren still holds onto the belief that he can help his mother and bring Volker home. With his position as a janitor under Luchino and Professor Thompson, he finds out that Thompson is on the search for exotic and rare reptiles. This, of course, makes Darren recollect the strange-looking serpent he had seen growing with 4 legs in his home. The thing had been continually returning back to his house after being kicked out. And it's important to mention that Darren greatly dislikes reptiles, so to see this weird little thing growing in his house would make him obviously concerned, and given the opportunity to get rid of it, and the process of getting more money in the way, he would only be too happy to take that opportunity. He sought to capture Volker and to sell him to Thompson for his research, and was finally able to do so, unaware that he had actually been capturing and selling off his own brother. The deduction states that rarity has nothing to do with beauty and value, but the rarity in and of itself gives it value. This explains the disdain that Darren has for this strange serpent. He doesn't understand why Thompson or anyone would want it, but he's only too happy to get rid of it, as long as he can still find a way to get money to travel to find his brother and to bring him back home. Deduction 9, transaction. Every person pays a price in their own different ways. Diary 6. Professor Thompson gasped at the evil snake. I told him everything, even about the newly grown legs. He had a somewhat odd look, but still took it anyway. Also, when I slept that afternoon, I had a strange dream involving a flight of long, very long stairs. Darren had eventually caught his brother and had sold him to Thompson. He explained the strange situation surrounding the serpent, seeing that it had grown 4 legs, that had Thompson, of course, intrigued. Volker earnestly believed that the devil was at play with this creature, explaining why Lucino's deductions say that he's involved in some taboo form of work. Because the serpent is, to them at least, a form of an abomination. With Darren sealing the deal, he also unknowingly had sealed his own fate. That night he has strange dreams of a staircase, and you can probably guess where this is going. First the father was plagued by these dreams, then Volker, and now Darren. There's obviously some twisted form of fate or something affecting the family lineage from Yidra, and leading to their tormented pain and suffering. To Dream Witch, however, with the absence of one pawn, she basically just moves on to the next. At the end of the day, the person controlling the pieces doesn't really care when they die, as long as they enjoyed them. Now we're going to go over to our next section. Are Volker, Lucino, and the servants the same thing? And I just include this because it can get a bit confusing on who is what. So, seeing everything that has happened, it's easy for people to assume that Volker, Yidra's servants, and Lucina all suffered the same sort of curse fate thing. But this isn't exactly correct. So, Yidra's servants are made by merging her with them. So, basically, it's sort of a process of becoming part of her, and in that, they lose their body as a consequence. Now, looking at the followers, we can also see their skin is a pale gray, and their scales are few but similar in texture and color to that of Yidra herself. As for Volker, he's depicted to have the body of a snake with strange whittle legs. I should also mention that these legs do grow over time, so he starts off without them, and eventually he grows these little legs. Yet both the followers and Lucino have less animalistic traits in appearance. Lucino is more of an anthro-looking design, while the followers are more humanoid overall. Conversely, Lucino is a vibrant green, and his scales are vastly different from the followers. While in Lovecraft lore, the children of Yig don't possess any venom, or at least if they do, it's not really stated. It's a bit unclear. I read the stories. I don't really go over that, but anyway, Lucino's deductions explicitly imply that it's him being bitten by Volker that leads to his whole transformation debacle, essentially meaning that, at least for IDV intents and purposes, the children of Yig are venomous, and that would mean that Volker is venomous. So essentially, Spack Notes version, Volker is cursed into a child of Yig by Yidra. They are venomous little creatures with a bite that can transform other people into these monstrous amalgamation type things. They don't transform into a child of Yig themselves, but into a whole different creature entirely. So Volker's going around, he gets cursed into this little child of Yig, this little snake-like thing with feet, and then Lucino gets bit by him. So he bites Lucino, and he's transformed into one of those strange little creatures, those monstrous amalgamation things. Then we have the followers, who have made a pact in exchange with Yidra for having eternal life and stuff. So essentially they become a part of her and live eternal. So they're not even involved in the curse stuff at all. They're like completely different. So hopefully that makes sense. Sort of. It's fine. Anyway, what is a follower and Yidra, and why are there no male followers? So this is going over like Yidra and the followers basically, and the male thing was just like sort of a little interesting thing, I found, as you do. So Yidra's life cycle centers around absorbing other life forms and taking from them their evolutionary advantages. In the process, she also takes their memories. This cycle of rebirth also makes her immortal, so that's cool for her. She has telepathic powers, and she's able to link it to her servants and can project illusions. Her servants are the lurkers in the desert, Exorthia, Yahath. I'm not paid to pronounce words that start with X and Y, okay? But those are two of her main servants in this place called the Lurkers of the Desert. And of course, besides them, she has the children of Yidra, who are her human followers, who are the little children we see in the game. Yidra's followers can gain immortality by merging with her, though they become somewhat like Yidra as a consequence. Those who serve her are promised plentiful harvests and healthy livestock. She usually conceals her true form behind a powerful illusion, appearing as a commonly young woman. Only favored members of her cult can see her for how she actually is. As for the illusion, Yidra takes on the form of a human named Madame Yi, in which she appears as a beautiful Asian female dressed in billowing red, white, and black robes, which has a delicate painted face that looks almost like a porcelain doll, possessing razor-like long fingernails. China is where this avatar appears and where it mates with and kills young men provided to her by her female followers. Yep. There you go. Producing monstrous, deformed offspring, most of which she reabsorbs into her body. There you have it. Anyway, this explains why we only see female followers. Male ones can exist, but females tend to suit her, needs, seduction needs a little bit better in luring unsuspecting males to her to kill and bring. Anyway, while we may not see Yidra's persona of Madame Yi in the game, we certainly do see traces of her, especially with her long, pointy fingernails. Also, this is more of a side note, and it's not like really related to anything, but Madame Yi basically looks like Geisha's pariah, like evil form. It's not like related in game or anything, but that's like basically what she looks like Spark Note summary. Anyway, however, from what we see, this relationship doesn't really seem entirely voluntary. Yidra's toy standby animation shows that her followers don't exactly like her, and I mean, I can't understand why. It's not like she forces them to breed with people, and I don't get it. Anyway, one follower tries to attack her with a pickaxe, only for Yidra to throw them away in their weapon and make them disappear. Yidra also seems to enjoy torturing her followers, evident in how she laughs when a follower is hit by a pallet. Now, this is personal. I personally believe that the followers are partially trapped in the previously mentioned dreamland. If one body dies while their consciousness is in dreamland, their mind will continue to exist eternally in the actual dreamland itself. This, of course, isn't the exact situation with the bodies of the followers, as they're still functional, but it seems that Yidra is controlling them and sort of possessing them. The character descriptions and designs describe the followers as soulless, and this could simply be referring to that their souls are being trapped in another realm, barely being able to slip back into reality now and then just to annoy Yidra in her standby animations. Yay. Alright, boys. Here it is, boys. Boys, here's the point. Here's the point y'all been waiting for. I don't know why I put it so far in my list of notes. Maybe I should move this earlier. Maybe I should. But it's time to talk about Yig Boy, boys. The son of Yig. The boy of Yig. Alright, so Yig takes vengeance on anyone who kills a serpent by killing them or turning them into a half-snake monster. The monster is first introduced in The Curse of Jig, a short story by H.P. Lovecraft where a couple learn about the local legends surrounding a snake god called Yig, which takes vengeance on anyone who kills a serpent. The husband happens to have an intense fear of snakes, and the wife has a brilliant idea of going and killing a nest of rattlesnakes at one of their campsites because of this. The husband is horrified by the thought of Yig going to take vengeance on them after hearing the story about him, and after building their cabin, the husband is insistent on practicing various rituals from the native tribes to keep Yig away. This sort of gets the wife all spooked about Yig and stuff, and the woman kinda, ends up killing her own husband in the dark, thinking he was Yig. She's then taken to an asylum and dies there, but not before giving birth to 4 half-snake-like creatures that are dubbed the Son of Yig. But of course we have to get a double whammy, so Yig basically also transforms her into a part reptile monstrosity, cursing her to wriggle on her belly like a snake for all of eternity. Yay! The Treacherous Curse of Jig is an evil ritual reserved for those who dare defy the serpent god. Also, those who injure or kill a serpent will incur this grave punishment. Should someone be cursed, a horrendous transformation will begin by striking the victim of the curse. In fact, their skin will gradually become scaly and cold, their hair will fall out, their eyes become glassy, and their tongue slit until he has the repulsive appearance of a reptile. The curse continues to alter the body, and within a little bit of time, the limbs begin to atrophy until legs and arms become short and fragile, forcing the individual to crawl across the floor. Despite the dramatic changes, the mind preserves its consciousness, imprisoned in a terrible body, half man, half serpent. This misfortune can continue for years and is irreversible. Sadly, not much of a surprise that most people afflicted tend to end their own life before it goes much further. But the question here is, why was Volker cursed? We never saw him harm a serpent or reptile, although we did theorize it was possible this could have been done sometime during the ritual mentioned earlier. It's also possible that their father may have done something that cursed his offspring, as was the case with the characters in the Curse of the Yig story, but this isn't 100%, and sadly we don't exactly know what he did yet. Additionally, I believe I stated this before, but I will state it again. I know this says the Yig curse, but what does it have to do with Yidra? Well, as I said before, I'm pretty sure IDV has kind of combined Yig and Yidra together. Again, they are sort of married or mated. They're in a relationship in Lovecraft lore, and they have well, at least in IDV, they happen to have similarities that overlap a lot, so I'm willing to assume that they've kind of just combined the two into one, or it's possible that she could have just gotten Yig to do it because she wanted to, and like they're kind of close, but it sort of depends, you know. Now, with all that out of the way, I would normally be moving to another point and then to tweets and sort of end it off around there, but I'm actually going to start with tweets before that, and that's because my next section ends with like a pretty cool line. I just feel like it would be better to end it with the words in it. It's kind of pretty interesting take. But first, let's go over epic tweet time, one of my favorite things we do. So, as always, my dudes, these tweets are translated by the previously mentioned Pascal from Twitter, and everything inside the little boxes are their own personal comments or pieces of information, translations, everything related to the tweet, and everything I put is outside of it. First, we have a cute little response from the Halloween 2020 event. So here, basically what's going on is it's trick or treat and stuff like that, and quote unquote, like we trick or treat, I don't know, with the Yidra and her servant, and this is what the follower says.
Huh? Wait, it appears she has nothing to give, so she said to take me as a replacement. But please take good care of me then.
Oh my gosh, forgive my anime voice, ugh. Anyway, this is just a cute little thing, but mainly what's important here is it's Yidra speaking sort of for the follower, so the follower can hear what Yidra's saying, and there's a couple other examples where we see this in the translations, where the follower is saying, oh, she says this, oh, Yidra says this, oh, this is what she says. So basically, she's just relaying what Yidra is saying to us, and she's giving her information to us, because obviously, they're the ones that have the pact with her, so they would know. Again, there's not much more information we can gain from this than we already know, but of course, the tweets are adorable, so I'm going to read them anyway. And now we have another one. So this one, we don't actually, or I don't at least have any background information for it. But here it is.
The steer struts down, descend them and dye your dark dreams in my colors. Do so with a faith like the moon, and I shall manifest myself before you. Is what she says.
That's what she said. I'm sorry. You can't end a line with "is what she says" and expect someone not to go, "Oh, that's what she says." Like, come on, I'm sorry, whatever. Anyway, the main point for this one is it's a clear reference to the stairs into Dreamland. This tweet reveals Yidra's presence is in this domain, and "is what she says" is also restated as a pretty common thing going on. But mainly the important thing about that one is Dreamland stairs. I'm not going to read any more of the tweets because personally I didn't think there was any that were that interesting, but you can always go check them out on Pascal's Twitter. Oh, I link it below in the information stuff. You can check it out. But yeah, so you can read all the other ones out if you want. Now I'm going to go over to my final point, unless I move the order of it. If I move the order of it, pretend I didn't say that. Wait, my notes. Wait, I'm lost. Wait. Alright, I'm found. I was lost and now I'm found. Here we go. So, what role does Yidra play in the deductions? Spoilers, Yidra isn't anywhere to be seen in these deductions. I mean, her influence is present, but like we never actually, did I say presence? Her influence is present. Gosh, I hate words. But we never actually see Yidra herself in these deductions. Now, to better understand this perspective, we're going to have to look at it through a literary lens. And with that, we're going to analyze two different literary terms, diegesis and mimesis. Diegesis and mimesis. Okay. By the way, that is how they're pronounced. I actually bothered to look it up. I just wanted to restate it so you could hear it better. I did look it up. I'm smart, guys. Anyway, diegesis refers to a narrator that explains the story action indirectly and describes the character's mindset from the outside or third-person point of view, such as old stories that start with "once upon a time." There's instantly a division created between the reader and the world, yet diegesis is essentially written from an omnipotent perspective. Mimesis, on the other hand, shows rather than explains the action, usually from a first-person point of view, since this is the traditional style you'll find in most books, ranging from Harry Potter to Lord of the Flies. And when I say first-person, I mean basically given from a closer perspective, not the actual definition of first-person. Now, whereas diegetic writing makes us feel distant, as though we're being lectured on the events that are happening in this place, mimetic writing makes us feel as though we're actually eyewitnesses to the event. Mimesis is generally considered a more popular way of writing style, and audience have favored it over the other form for generally a long time, but this isn't always the case. The opening lines, for instance, to the sequel of Stephen King's The Shining, employed diegetic writing, as we're given a brief overview of the newly introduced character without actually given their point of view and perspective. We're not experiencing the event firsthand, and a specific scene is not being described to us. The spans of time are being glossed over so that the reader is distracted from any particular point of action. Essentially, while it may not be popular, there are certain instances where a writer may purposefully employ this writing style to help deliver information or to purposely create distance between the reader and the character. Okay, but like, what does all that jazz have to do with Yidra, and like, what about narratology? What does that have to do? Well, narratology, which is the study of writing overall in general, is actually great for identifying the symbols and patterns which we can see in this story. And boy, are the symbols and patterns in this story, mucho gusto. I think that's French. Is that French? I don't know. It's good. It's really good. Anyway, in order to identify diegeses and mimesis, I first have to explain the literary pattern of two parallel stories we're being told. Yidra's deductions tell the story of two groups. It directly tells us Volker's story, and it indirectly tells us Lucino's and Thompson's. So I'm going to separate this. I actually wrote a little chart if you guys want to look at it like in the document below. But anyway, I have story A, which is Volker and Darren, and story B, which is Lucino and Thompson. All right. So, both of these stories can be broken down into a similar structure. This was just my take on the structure. I saw a similar theory about these stories being parallel, by the way, from this person who is, I've looked at their analysis stuff in the past. They're really good at it, but I didn't 100% agree with it. Just, not that it was bad, just that like I felt that there were some different connections I would have made, so I made a little edit version myself here. So this is the structure I came up with, which is start, curiosity, crisis, downfall, aftermath, acceptance, and ending state. The 7 steps of the story. So for the start, let's compare. Number 1 is start. What is the start? So for story A, which is Volker and Darren, Volker is away researching and Darren is taking care of their mother. For story B, which is Lucino and Thompson, Lucino is away and he hasn't yet been assigned to his partner, Thompson, who is researching. To summarize the similarities, both Volker and Lucino are researchers who have another character waiting their presence. Then we go on to the second part, which is curiosity. Story A is Volker investigating further into Dreamland despite being aware that his family is concerned for him. As for story B, Thompson asked for help in researching a strange creature they've been given, the cursed Valker. Now, Lucino has a rocky relationship with Thompson, but he's happy to take the opportunity to work with him. So, for these two, Lucino and Valker both are on rocky terms with people they're working with or are close to, but because they have good intentions, they put this aside for the greater good. Now we have the fourth step, downfall. Now for part A, Valker goes too far into dreamland and gets afflicted with a curse. For part B, Lucino continues to ignore the dangerous conditions and gets bit by the cursed Valker. The similarities being that Lucino and Valker's thirst for knowledge lead them to make rash decisions that end up backfiring on them. Then we have step 5, aftermath. A, Valker continues to transform until he's that little weird snake thing. Cute little snaky. I don't like snakes, but cute little snaky. Then we have B, where Lucino continues to transform until he becomes the lizard boy. So the similarities, they both go through a little weird transformation and they can't really stop it. Then we have 6, acceptance. A, Valker tries to continue his goal in visiting his family. They end up not recognizing him and eventually he just has to accept how things are. For Lucino, he tries to continue his goal of researching, but his transformation takes him over and eventually he just has to accept what he is. The similarities, they both have goals that they want to accomplish, but they're not able to do so anymore, and eventually they're forced to accept how things are. And then we have 7, which is the ending state. As for A, Valker is stuck in his cursed form, and B, Lucino is stuck in his cursed form. The similarities, it's pretty simple. That's the similarity. Anyway, perhaps I'm just reading too far into this, but to me, it does seem like these stories are purposefully meant to parallel each other. Valker is meant to parallel with Lucino, and Darren is actually meant to parallel with Thompson, as Darren and Thompson are both the sort of secondary character to the stories, I guess you could say. We're told Valker's story directly, and then we're indirectly told Lucino's. If these stories are meant to be parallels, then what else is in common? Well, Yidra directly curses Valker and sort of indirectly curses Lucino, showing more of a similarity as how she did one thing directly to one person, and the other was sort of a result of that first curse. Now, we're also told that Yidra isn't the focal point of these stories. She's telling other people's stories as an omnipotent narrator. She is telling the diegetic story of all of these characters. Rather fitting, as she's literally a wise god, you know? To put it simply, whether it be to convey a deeper meaning or perhaps simply for her own amusement, Yidra is our narrator. She is the driving force for all the suffering in her deductions, yet she is completely outside of them. What's more is she's the driving force behind other characters' torment as well, yet she's never truly seen in anyone's deductions. In a strange way, this makes perfect sense. Because when reading a novel, the author is not written into the story. Yidra's deductions are just one tale of many she's created for her own sick pleasure. To her, the suffering of Valker's family is inconsequential, as is the case for all those she has mutilated and scorned. She does not care.